Okay guys, today we're going to be doing trusses. Okay, step 1, you want to jump onto the truss. Then step 2, you can jump off the truss. And that's it for trusses, guys. That's it. That's all there is to it. Alright, you get it by now. Trusses aren't that simple. Okay, so today I will be teaching you all about trusses. So I'm going to start simple and then it'll get more and more complicated. Alright, however, I will be teaching you the basic mechanics. There are about 3 broad categories I will be teaching you, and all the rest of the stuff will just be application of that. However, the application of that knowledge is probably going to be the most important. So I have time-stamped this video. I know many of you already know a lot about Obbies, but if you are new, I'd advise you to watch this whole video and try your best to digest the information I'll be giving to you. So let's get started. First things first, we have a little truss here, okay? You can go on it, you can jump off of it, just like you saw at the start of the video. However, there are 3 ways of jumping off of this truss. They're called truss momentums, okay? First way, see on the bottom left, has my keyboard, okay? If I just press space, that's the first way. Now, if you use upward momentum, which is when you're holding a key that will make you move upwards on the truss, and then you press space. Okay, this method will give you more height but less distance than just the jump method. Okay, and then you have downward momentum. If you press a key or hold a key going downwards while jumping, you will get the most distance, however, the least amount of height. Okay, so I have calculated, well, not really calculated, observed where this will go. So first things first, we will just jump, normal momentum. I go on the blue. Okay, it is about 4, 5, 6.5 studs away from the truss. You actually don't, that measurement doesn't really matter, but I digress. Okay, let's go to upward momentum. Here I will hold D, because D will make me go up on the truss, and then I will press space. Okay, that has gotten me less distance. And then for the final one, we have downward momentum, which is pressing A in this case, and then jumping. It will lead me over to this red one, which is about like 8 studs away. So we have these 3. Now, what do we do with them? Okay, now let me show you. All right, just a little thing to add about the momentum jumps. You can actually draw them out with a momentum vector chart, as you can see. So whenever I'm just doing normal, I'll show you an image of just, you see the black line, the arrow, that's where my momentum is pointed. So if I just jump, it'll push me that way. However, with upward momentum, say, I will have the momentum of me going upwards on the truss, and then also that will be added on to the momentum of me jumping. So as you can see, the one going up and the one going left, and then you will have the sum of that, which will look like that green arrow, and it will make me go upwards, but as a trade-off, I will go less distance. And then for downward momentum, it will be the opposite, of course. We will have the momentum of me going down on the truss, and then also the momentum of my jump. So I won't go as high, however, I will go further. And all right, carry on. There's some jumps that can only be made with these types. So this one, green, as you may have correlated here with upward momentum, this jump can only be completed with upward momentum. See, if I do that, I can make it. However, if I just jump, it won't make it, normal momentum. And if I do downward momentum, I also won't make it. So you can utilize this knowledge by using it in some jumps that have, say, a platform that is quite a bit high compared to the truss. Now, this one is downward momentum, okay? You can tell that it's very far away from the truss, and downward momentum will give you the most distance. So you can make it with downward momentum, but if you do use just normal momentum, you won't be able to make it. And if you use upward momentum, you won't, or if you use upward momentum, you won't be able to make it. Okay, and then normal momentum, it may seem kind of useless now. However, normal momentum, it's very, very consistent. And also, there's some jumps like this where the setup is just easier if you use normal momentum. You see, I can go fit into that squeeze really easily. However, if I use upward momentum per se, I won't be able to fit into it. I won't go far enough. And if I use downward momentum, I'll go too far. Okay, so normal momentum, I'd say you should use normal momentum in most cases because all you have to do is press the jump button. Okay, you don't have to do this complicated 2 buttons pressed and time it. Just normal momentum is a very, very well-rounded, type of jumping off a truss. Okay, I use it in most cases, unless it's, or just like for simple jumps, I use it. So, oh yeah, we have the height. Okay, so for these, you get super high height on upward momentum. However, how high is it? Okay, we have this over here. So it'll show us, I usually count by truss rungs, but you can also count by studs. Okay, so we'll start with downward momentum. I go about 1 truss rung or 2 studs down from the ceiling when I'm using downward momentum, and then it's from the top of your head. So you can see if I use downward momentum right here, my head just barely like grazes the ceiling. And then for normal momentum, it is about 2 truss rungs or 4 studs down from the top of your head, and you can see that my head barely grazes it again. You're just under it, and that's what you want. And then for upward momentum, it is about 3 or 2.5 truss rungs or about 5 or 6 studs down. You can see if I use it, I hit my head there, but there, I just barely made it. So this is a very good measurement because some people might be using downward momentum, say 2 truss rungs down, and they won't make the jump because they're too far down and they won't get enough, distance. So that is the truss momentums. You will be able to utilize these in very specific manners, but just day-to-day use, just on regular truss jumps you see just anywhere, you should probably use normal. Okay, so we're going to be heading on to a more complicated subject. Many of you might have seen me already. I use these things called flicks. Okay, now these flicks are very helpful for maneuvering around trusses, especially if there is not a ceiling. So say you want to go down there, flicking around this would be very helpful to go down there. However, it is pretty hard for new players to do such a thing because normal games it is usually you flick that direction, but in Roblox you flick that direction and go back. So you just have to do this and you have to go back to the same spot every time you flick. And that is a really hard thing to pick up. But if you practice a lot, say just look at like a line and every time you flick back you want your cursor to be on that line, then you'll inevitably get better at flicking. Now, so actually there's two types of flicks. You have a negative flick, which is like this. You're flicking the opposite way that you want to go. So say if you want to go that way, you'll flick that way. So as you can see, I'm doing this, and then I'm holding a positive movement key, which would be D, which would make me go that way. However, there is another flicking option, which is a positive flick. You see, it's kind of like this. Okay, just a little thing to note about this positive and negative stuff in case you're confused. Say I'm on this part and I have a destination, which is that green part. Okay, any key that moves me to my destination would be called a positive movement key. So in this case, it would be W because W moves me to that area. And then S would be a negative movement key because it moves me away from it. However, it's subject to change. It's solely dependent on the destination. So I can have D as a positive movement key. I can have S as a positive movement key. And then I can also have S as a negative movement key. And so just to apply it to a little situation right here, say I'm on this truss and I want to get to this part right here, okay? And say I want to use upward momentum. Now, if I just do that by holding A, which makes me move up, and then I press space, like this, it won't work because A in this case is a negative movement key. It will move me away from my destination, okay? So in many upward momentum type of situations, you want to move, well, you need to use a negative movement key to do the upward momentum jump, but you want to immediately switch to a positive movement key. So I'll use A to go up and jump, then I'll immediately switch to D like that, and I'll make it. So just in case you were a little confused, you can just apply that to flicks like I was showing you. Anyways, back to the video. So for negative flicks, their pros are it's more controlled. Okay, you can go around turns pretty easily with it. But positive flicks, they are less controlled. You usually use them if you want to go like a great deal of distance on a truss in a short time, or if there's, say, an obstacle right here in the way. Using a positive flick is much better than, say, using a negative flick. See, if I try to do a negative flick, I'll get stuck on it, or I'll barely pass it. So there is also another way to go around trusses that I see beginners using a lot, which is just the holding a positive movement key and holding space on a ceiling. This can only be done under a ceiling. Say this example up here, you can't hold space because there is no ceiling below you or above you, below you. So you will have to flick. So I'd say learning flicking is a very, very beneficial time payout. Okay, you should definitely learn flicking, and it can also be pretty satisfying. You know what I mean? And then, so how flicking works basically, I'll tell you this, okay? Being on a truss is solely dependent of where the front of your body is. So if the front of your body, say, is not on the truss, then you won't climb it, okay? It has to be this front of your body. You see like the line from in between your legs up to like the top of your torso, okay? So this is like your cursor in first person. It's the same thing as the front of your body. So say if I'm on this and I have my cursor on it, then I will be on the truss, okay? However, if I take my cursor off the truss, I will fall off, okay? This is very important to note. It can be used in a lot of cases if you want to get to like the direct side of a truss without falling off. You can utilize your cursor, okay? But also, this explains flicking, okay? What you're doing is you're making your cursor go off of the truss and then going back onto it while holding a key that will make you move across the truss to where you want to go. So you see my cursor, I can do this kind of shift flick type of truss movement, truss flick, and you can see I move slightly because I'm holding a positive movement key, but most importantly, my cursor is going off of the truss. You can see this, very well if you just have your cursor on the truss and you go to the corner and you'll just fall off. And if you just go barely to where you fall off and then go back, then you'll move across it. That's how a flick works. And you can also shift flick, which is it's more controlled than a negative flick, and you can use it in a lot of cases, saying like jank obbies. Very useful. But to show you more on this like cursor type of thing, we have this right here, which I want to get to this side of the truss. However, there's a blocking thing right here, so you can be very, very like coordinated, and you see my cursor, it like barely goes off, and then by holding the movement key you will stay on it by just doing this. And then so you can go to the corner of the truss and say go to like an object that seems impossibly out of reach otherwise. And then however, okay, you can't go too far you can't turn too far or else you'll fall off the truss. This is because the front of your body only has a certain amount of reach forward, okay? So you have this kind of like reach. If there's a truss, say right here, you will be able to climb it. However, if the truss is right here, you won't be able to climb it. You have this sort of reach that you can climb a truss with, okay? And if you spin this around into a circle, per se, you'll have this little circle of reach. If there's a truss in anywhere on this circle, then you will be able to grab it. Here, I'll show you an example. See, if my cursor is on any point where the cylinder or the circle is inside of the truss, then I'll be able to grab it. However, if my cursor goes outside of this reach, where the circle goes outside of the truss, then you will fall off of it. So here, well, I'm too close. See, this is like an approximation. It's not fully accurate, just to give you representation, but you only have a limited sort of reach to go onto a truss. And so this is very, like, memorizing how far your reach is a very beneficial for finding strategies and stuff on a truss, and just to not fall off of them in general, because you just can't turn too far. So and then I will be showing reaching the limits of how far you can actually go, because if you remember flicking, there's another way that flicking is useful. It's by going further away from a truss, okay? So if you flick, you can actually see that your body goes from, say, this close to the truss to this far from the truss. And you can get this up to about, theoretically you could go to a whole one stud away. However, this is 0.94 studs. This is 0.96 and then 0.98. So I'm about 0.98 studs away from this truss. And this is actually a very useful strategy, because the dogma of obbies is that, say there was an obstacle or like a little part here that I want to get onto, you want to get your body as close as you can to that part. It'll make it easier to jump. Of course, there are some exceptions, but here I'll pull up a video showing the importance. So here, pay attention to the amount of distance away my torso is from the truss. And as you can see that like if the distance is too short and I'm too close to the truss, then I won't make the jump. However, if I'm further away, then I do make the jump. So being further away and flicking away from a truss is very useful in trying to jump onto a part that's like super far away. So that's about it for truss like flicking and staying onto it. I'm just saying whenever you encounter a truss in the wild, make sure you keep in mind that your cursor is what keeps you onto it, and first person is a very, very useful tool to show that. So just know that the center of your body, if it's on the truss, then you're on the truss. However, you only have a limited range, which is about one stud. However, it's kind of weird. It's you can't get onto a truss if you're one stud away. See, I'm a little bit less than one stud away. However, I'm not on the truss. It's actually 0.5 studs to grab a truss. So say right here, I'm a little bit less than 0.5 studs away. So never mind, I was not less than 0.5 studs away. Okay, now I am. That's about 0.75 studs. I won't grab it. However, if I do go to 0.5 studs, which is about what, like right there. Yeah, it's about 0.5 studs. If I do that, then I will grab it. However, if you can go away from the truss while climbing it to about one stud from your torso. And then if you see how far away from the truss this actually is, it correlates to about 0.75 studs if you're backwards. And that's just, that actually is just the case for any time you go backwards. It's always about, well, this is a little bit less than 0.75 studs. So it's usually around about 0.75 studs when you're going backwards. So that's just a helpful thing to keep in mind. But I think the most important thing that, I was teaching someone and I brought up this little cylinder or circle of reach, and it really helped them a lot. So that's about it for flicking and truss momentum. So I will now move on to truss flicks and jumps. I actually want to segue into a case you see very often in Obbies. It's a truss, and then you have a wall right on top of it. And it's not a ceiling, it's just a wall. So you can still stay on the truss. And I'm just going to show you how to maneuver around it. You see, we have these things called truss glides, where at the top of a truss, if you go too high, you'll basically like bang your head against the wall. But it's when you go too high, you're off the truss for maybe say like a second, and in that second, well, not a second, way less than a second, but you get the idea. In that time, you can move. So say if I'm holding a positive movement key, I can move to where I want to go. Okay? But make sure, okay, you can either use one key and it'll make you go really fast, or you can use two. I'll use, say, W and A in this case. You'll go a lot slower, but it's more controlled. And then just make sure whenever you're using the one key that you angle a little bit towards the wall. Because remember, if you're angled away from the wall, you'll get further and further from the truss. And as we saw, we only have a limited reach. So if you get too far away from the truss, you'll inevitably fall off. Just a thing to keep in mind. And then if you ever want to go around a corner, say, using two keys, W and D, or W and A, whichever you want, just positive movement keys, and then one having your momentum against the wall, it's much, much easier to control than just, say, using one key. You'll just fall off. So That's just a little thing, maneuvering around truss corners, and that will really help in starting truss flicks like this. Okay, and so a truss flick is basically anytime you're on a truss like this and it has this wall right here. I mean, it doesn't really need the wall, but it's usually there. And the way a truss flick works is basically your body, whenever you say like shift like that, it will go into this brick, okay? And for like a split second, maybe like 1 frame or 2 frames, it'll be inside the wall. And in that time that's inside the wall, you can hold space and make sure you space after you shift into the wall, or else you'll just fall off, or not fall off, you'll jump off normally. But anyways, so your body moves into it a little bit, and your legs, they don't really care about this wall. All they care about is what's under it. So you see, this is 2 separate parts. So your legs will be into it, and it will register the top of this truss as below you, and it will let you jump. Okay? And then, so you can do that in any which way. Say you can flick off of it, you can shift flick, or you can turn your camera slightly, and then you can, because it'll register as inside the wall when it moves into it. Because remember, you only go on the truss when you're 0.5 studs into it, or like away from it, less than 0.5 studs away from it, right? You can't do it when you're 1 stud away. However, once you're on a truss, you can move 1 stud away. Now, okay, that means that your actual body, whenever you get off the truss, is about half a stud forward than you think it is. Okay, so that means whenever your body is less than half a stud away from this wall, then you're able to flick, because your body will register inside of it. Okay, no, that's actually because the side of your body went into it, because when you're like this, the side is about half a stud more than the forward. I actually was trying to mention it's because of that, you can do stuff like this, even though turning like that doesn't put it into your body. So like that. Okay, back to the video. Because your body will register inside of it, and that's exactly why you can do it like this, even though, look, your torso's not in it. It's actually about half a stud closer into it in reality whenever you jump. So this will work, okay? And then same thing for flicks. You flick fast enough, your body will go into the wall for a frame or two, and you're able to jump, okay? And so that's how truss jumps work, truss flicks work, shift flicks, call it whatever you want. But with these, you can do a lot, and they're seen a lot everywhere in Obbies. So you can go in between two, you can go in between two again, okay? You can go to another truss really far away, and if you ever want to maximize this distance, there's a little trick, okay? So as you know, by shifting into this, your leg will go into the wall, and then Roblox will register it into the wall and try to fix it, so it'll push you out. And so if you go down, say, your legs will be further, when you shift, your legs will be further down into this truss, and it will push you up, okay? And so this push up will give you more height in your jump, and consequently more distance. So it'll be easier to make longer jumps. However, please do note that there is leeway above. So it's the bottom of your torso to the top of the first truss rung will give you the most distance. However, you can go a little bit above, that's fine, but if you go below, then either you'll get flat-sided or you won't get any jump at all. Okay, so just know that there's leeway above, but below is very risky. Okay, you want to be slightly above, if not right at the top. Okay, and that will give you the highest distance possible. Well, not highest distance, highest height, and consequently highest distance. So keep that in mind. It's very, very useful for tight jumps. So yeah, and then you can make super, super long jumps, say like this one. Well, you have to jump super late. Yeah, I don't know if I'll make it, but anyways, so that's how to get the highest height in you know, truss flicks. Same thing, the same. You see that like the top of my or bottom of my torso is at the top of the truss. It works for flicking, however, it doesn't work for doing this strategy because you have to be at the top because you're only pressing a key and you're not shifting. So works for stuff like this, and yeah. And then so trusses get really complicated. Truss flick is like the easiest thing you can do, and then they'll add other stuff like say like 2 squeezes in it, and you have to try to make this jump while also doing the truss flick. So getting a truss flick down, like the keys, because you have to press 3 keys, or if you're shifting it's only 2, but three keys, it's quite a bit. If you're already familiar with it like I am, I can't fathom it being hard or not being able to do it, but I know for beginners it can be quite hard. So just look at the order that I'm doing this in. Firstly, I'm doing shift and a positive movement key, and then I'm pressing space after. The most important thing you have to note is to press shift before you press space, because if you press space before shift, this is what happens. Okay, you have to press shift before space, like that. Okay. And then, so this is like the most basic. I will get into applications of all of these 3 mechanics. So, stay tuned for that, I guess. Okay, yeah, another thing to note is, you can do this. However, you can't shift straight on and do it. So that means you can't do it backwards either. So you can't go straight backwards. You can say go a little bit turned backwards. But there is a solution to this. As you know, you might have known, okay? If you jump onto a truss, you'll be really close. Or if you're say on the truss and you jump back to it, you'll be very close to it. And now remember that your torso is actually about half a stud or a quarter of a stud into it. So at this, you can do it fully backwards and do it. And if you have good eyes, you can see that my body goes into the stud for like a frame. And so it is useful for jumps like this, per se. I have to be very close to it because if I'm too far away from it, say just Wing at the top, then I won't be able to do it. So if I'm very close to it, that's not close enough. If I'm very close to it like this, then I can make a jump like that where I have to get onto another truss and it has to be on my forward. Okay. Welcome to the sphere. Okay, no, actually, another thing to note before we get into the application and hop into a different game, I will be going over flat siding on trusses. Okay, so what flat siding on trusses is basically is either you're a little bit too far away from the truss, or you mistime your key activations. Okay, and you'll get like stuck at the truss, and you'll lose quite a bit of your forward momentum on it, and you won't be able to go as far. I'll show some clips of it happening because it happens quite frequently, but not enough to just wing it like I can do right now. But uh, so I'll pull up some clips. Pay attention to the one that doesn't make it and why it doesn't make it. Okay. Alright, so welcome to the final section of the video, the application section, where I'll be using examples from actual obbies because, you know, I'm not that creative at building. Um, Now, in a perfect world, this video would have been in actually 3 sections instead of 2. However, the third part is a little too difficult for me. You see, it is to go from theoretical knowledge to practical examples and then finally to practical experience. But unfortunately, I'm unable to transmit experience into your brain, so you'll have to go get it yourself. So, in order to facilitate this process, I will put the name of any obby in the top right of the screen if you wish to practice any of these. As you can see right now, I am in the citadel of laptop splitting. Many of you may recognize it. And to note, most of the tiered obbies that I'll be in will be in the practice place, as shown on the screen. And you can find like a list of like 500 obbies and search up the name of what is on the top right of any tiered obby I'm in. If it's not in the practice place, then I will say that. Anyways, okay, back to the main objective. So in these examples, I'll be giving like a window into my thought process and applying what we previously learned. So putting this theoretical material into actual practicality. All right. So I will also on each one, like example scenario, I'll give an extra piece of extraneous knowledge that applies to the situation because of course I may have covered the 3 basics to get you prepared for most truss, obstacles. There is many more little nuances and like normalized strategies that we use for a lot of these truss scenarios, like going on the corner of a truss, and then how to deal with slanted trusses and whatnot. So let's get started into this first one. Oh, also, by the way, this will be going from simple to hard. So if you're already well versed in obbies, then you could skip a little bit through, like halfway through the application, and it'll probably get to some harder stuff because this will just be the basics. And to show you that, here is what a lot of people say one of the hardest parts of the Citadel, but it's very failable. You're over, what that's like 8, 9 floors that you can fall down, so you'd be very nervous if you get up here your first time. So let's go over how to do this. We have this truss right here. It has a wall up above it. Then you need to make your way from this truss to this truss onto the right. And so we'll first wrap onto this truss and see that we have to go around this truss to go to that truss. So what I'll do is I'll use the truss maneuvering, gliding across the truss. I'll hold W and then I'll use my positive movement key, and then it'll be a controlled turn if I use my mouse, like that. Okay, now to get to this truss, we can say jump to it, but we'll have to face it, right? So if we just jump like this, we won't latch onto it because to grab onto a truss, we need to use the front of our body. So I'll turn around like this, and then when I jump, I will press the shift key So I'll turn the other way. And I did it, and I grabbed it. Okay, so now we go up here. We have another one against the wall. And remember, if you're against the wall, you can do a flick. So you can do that, you can do that, and it's also the same thing on the bottom down here. You can flick around, right? If you want to do that, it's only one key pressed, or well, plus spacebar, instead of having to press shift and turn your camera. That's quite a bit of keys pressed at the same time, and many of you may be overwhelmed with it. So, I mean, if you can find a simple strategy that's consistent for you, then by all means do so. Some of the strategies I showcase for jumps may be really consistent for me, but not for you. So it doesn't matter. You can get inspiration from other people's strategies, but it doesn't matter how well the strategy works for them. It matters how well it works for you. So make sure your strategies are very consistent, okay? So up here, we can either flick onto this, right? Or we can jump onto it, like this. But the extra tidbit of knowledge that I wanted to give you today was this high FPS truss glitch, okay? So when you're on a high FPS, here, let me show. Shift F5, you see on the top left, you'll see my FPS is at 240, and I purposely put it that high to show you the high FPS truss glitch. Basically, when you're on a truss and you're too close to it, say probably like 0 to 0.4 something studs away from the truss, then you might get this high FPS truss glitch where you will you'll jump off and you won't get any height, hold on. Yeah, you'll jump off, you won't get any height, and your feet will like flutter kick. And there's also a different variant of this. If you go, so this variant usually happens at around like this far away from the truss, so this is probably about a quarter stud, maybe a little bit more. And if you go really close to the truss and jump, you might get this jump, which is, it makes you like go very far out. Well, okay. You see I'm close to the truss, and you see that jump, it's like, compared to the normal jump here, look at the normal jump. Just that, and then when you have the far jump, it's like that. So it's definitely a very noticeable difference, and it could really impact your performance. Because if you also do note that this jump, while it may give you quite a bit of distance, it gives you almost no height. So keep that in mind. You see my head doesn't really go above like here. But in a normal jump, say like this, you'll go up 4 studs like I showed you in the theoretical. Now, a way to combat this, of course, is to just flick away from the truss and see now once you're more than 0.5 studs away, you're basically just safe. Here, I'll put up a diagram, because the higher the FPS you have, the further away from the truss that this will happen to you. So you see on 60 FPS, it happens basically not at all. You can go 0 studs away from the truss and you'll be perfectly fine jumping, and I'll show that right here. So if I go on 60, you'll see on the top left my FPS is 60. If I go really close to the truss, then I'll jump normally. And so you see it kind of goes up and then it flat lines at about like 160, 170 FPS to that like 0.4, 0.5 range. Okay, so keep in mind what FPS you're on, because it will affect you jumping off of a truss. Okay, so I'll go back to 240 and I'll give my thoughts on why this might happen. So I see that your legs, they kind of flutter out, and immediately when I think of this, I'm thinking, okay, so on 240 FPS, that means Roblox is registering every single move 4 times as much basically than at 60 FPS. So I think Roblox is registering like when you jump, you'll go out maybe like a stud on one frame in 60 FPS, but on 240 you might only go out like a quarter of a stud. So what I'm thinking is that whenever you jump on high FPS, Roblox will have more time to register each little move, so it will jump you twice. Because you jump from the truss, you go out a quarter of a stud, and it will register your climbing animation because you're not more than one stud away from the truss, and then it will jump you again. And for some reason, that will make you lose your height. But that's why I think you see that flutter kick, because it's registering a climbing animation for one frame. Now, a little idea to, counteract that, I saw, or we both saw, that when we go closer to it, then it gives us like a double jump. So I was thinking that at this length, it would try to give you a double jump, but it wouldn't accurately do it. It would give you like a 1.5, but it would get rid of all your momentum because you were on that climbing animation for one frame. Now, for it to give you the actual double jump on, when you're closer to it, doesn't really make too much sense. I would think it would be opposite, that the flutter kick is when you're closer to it and the double jump is when you're further away from it. But remember that Roblox physics only mocks real life. So, I mean, there's some stuff that may be unexplainable. So maybe my efforts at explaining this are futile and that it's totally wrong. So please take it with a grain of salt, but that's just what I observed. Oh yeah, also thing to note on any FPS, if you're at the top of it, say like you're like your bottom of your torso is like more than one stud up, or yeah, like 1.25 stud up, then you're fine to jump. So just something to note there, and then make sure you remember, if you're on high FPS, you'd be like, oh, if I want to jump off this truss, then maybe I should flick out. And now I'm more than half a stud away from the truss, and I can jump just totally fine. So make sure you keep that in mind. That's a very helpful tip for beginners. I know that in Eternal Towers of Hell, there is this FPS. It'll basically fix the physics on the FPS for high FPS. It'll fix it and make it normal. But if you're going to higher level obbies, say like the Eternal Abyss doing horrifics and unreals, know that if you want these completions to count on the list, then you can't use that high FPS fix because it is unlegit. So I would recommend getting used to flicking out from a truss to avoid the high FPS. And flicking out is, it's a good habit as well, because you're getting closer to your target, right? Of course, there's special cases where being closer to the truss is better, but most of the time, flicking out is a great idea. So that's it for this scenario. On to the next scenario. Okay, in this scenario, we have a truss right here, and we need to get up onto this ceiling. There is a wall against it, so we're able to flick off of this truss. So to get up there, let's say we need to go up. That means we won't use any of our jumps because it's too far up. So we will need to use, say, a truss flick. So maybe I can flick, but if I just flick in place, then I'll hit my head. All right, and then let me go out so I don't hit my head. And that also doesn't work because D, in this case, it was a positive movement key. I was using it correctly. However, it became a negative movement key if I kept holding it, because then I was going away. So what we need to do is we need to change into a positive movement key at that. And then I also notice here that this is quite a bit tall, so I will go at it forwards like that so as to climb it. And climbing it will give you, or it'll let you go higher than just doing it like, well, you might be able to, yeah, doing it sideways. So that's one And then I also found another one up here. Say we have this truss right here. Now I notice there is a ceiling above it, and we need to get onto here. And my first thing I saw was this right here. Now this is called a bottom flick, and you're able to do the same thing as a truss flick. It's just upside down. So you're able to flick off the bottom because you still have the same physics with your feet. It'll still register the bottom as a thing you can flick off of, so you can do something like that. Now, one thing to note here is, remember, on a truss flick, you couldn't be too far out or it wouldn't work. Now, in this case, remember that when your body, your torso, is in here, your actual torso is about like a quarter to a half stud inward. So if your torso's too far inward and you go down here, it'll register your legs being on this bottom thing. So you'll fall off like this. So see, if I just tap it, it would register me on it and I'll fall off. So that's what happens when you're too close. So you can't be too close or too far. All right, you need to be like a perfect length between like a quarter stud and a half stud away. One thing that this will help on is you can go up to a ceiling and then say hold a movement key that will push you into the truss, and then hold space for like a second, and you'll be at the perfect distance away to do this. Now in this case, I noticed that this bottom flick didn't give me enough height, even when I did the method to go to the perfect like super jump area. So I was like, all right, I might have to use my jumping here. So what I do is I would use upward momentum. So I'll press A, in this case, a negative movement key, and then space, and then I'll switch to D, my positive movement key. And then boom, I made that jump. Okay, on to the next scenario. Guess what? I have another thing to mention. Oh, isn't that beautiful? Okay. You might have noticed when I was doing the upward momentum, I was not 3 truss prongs down, I was 1 truss prong down. And you might be a little bit confused. Why was I 1 truss prong down? Well, you might already be able to identify why. You see, I get the furthest, or the greatest amount of height, not at the first stud, but around about 6 or 7, or probably about 5 or 6 studs out. So depending on how far this ceiling goes out will tell me where I can do the upwards momentum. So on a downwards momentum, I can be really close to it and still jump without hitting my head. And upwards momentum, I usually go about 1 stud below, because if I go any bit higher, it might not work. Because I just want to be as careful as possible, because I don't really care about making it as precise as it can, because this jump isn't too hard. I just want to be able to do it consistently. And another thing to mention, it depends on how close you are to this truss. So say if I'm right here, then doing like one truss prong down, well, I mean, it works, but if you go any bit higher, say like up here, it might not work. However, if I do go further out, say like this far out, then I can go to that height just fine. All right, that's it. Next scenario. All right, new scenario. We are on this truss right here, and we must get over to this right side of the truss. However, the problem here, there is a kill brick spinner that kind of hurts my eyes right above us. So we can't just flick over there, because we will hit our head. And as you heard from that sound effects, that means I would have died if I was in a real run. So to prevent this, maybe we don't flick over there. Say we use upward momentum. Let's see how many studs down we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is about good. I'll go a little bit lower because the kill brick spinner is a little bit scary. And then I'll turn a little bit because I'll have to get right back onto here. It's only one truss prong, so it'll be not too much to grab onto. So sure, we could do that, but as you saw, that was a little bit close, and I missed that one. So there is actually a way to make this a lot easier. Many of you might know it. It is no jumping on a truss. Now, remember when I told you that going the bottom of your torso to the top of the first truss rung like this? Well, to show you what actually happens, remember I told you that your foot is shoved into this truss, and to boot you out of it, your arm will be in the wall, so it'll push you to the right, but your foot will also be in the truss, so it'll push you up. And so if I don't jump and I just shift, it'll push me up, and that'll be different from, say, I'm at the top of the truss and I get barely any height. So for this, we'll go down to the bottom of the truss, and then we'll just treat it like a normal truss flick, just without jumping. So okay, there we go. You have to turn a little bit more, and then that just makes it really easy and has almost no failability. So if you're ever on a no jump, or no jump truss section, then you can just harness this power. Alright, new scenario. So basically we have this truss right here that's kind of at an angle. Then we have to make it through this gap and onto this ladder that we have to climb. Now what I want to show in this scenario is the power of having, taking camera out in third person and going through the gap, and then once you're in the gap that you want to go through, you can do this with most gaps. Now what you want to do is now just shift, and so your body is situated basically at a perfect angle to go through this gap. Now all that's left to do is to jump like that. And well, I didn't make the jump because it's a pretty hard jump, but see, if I do it again, the setup wasn't the problem, it was me that was the problem. I just want to show you the setup on this, and you can use it for a lot of stuff. And then there you go, you have your little setup that you can do with a lot of truss jumps that look similar to this. You have to go through like a little squeeze, and yeah. Okay, on to the next scenario. Alright, say hello to the new scenario. Hey, we got this truss here, then we have this ceiling up here, which might be a hindrance to me, and then we have this platform that we need to go onto. Now we want to get ourselves as close to the platform as possible, so I'd say to do that, we'll go to the corner of the truss. Now you can do this either by flicking to it, or people who aren't the best at flicking, we can utilize the ceiling above us and go under it and hold space till we're at the corner. Now the ceiling, like I mentioned, might have been a hindrance to me, so what I'm gonna do is flick away from the truss. Now this is quite a bit harder on a corner, but it is very important to learn how to flick away on a corner for any jumps that you encounter that are like this. You can use shift flicks, that gets me far away. You can just flick normally. However, usually when you flick normally, you don't have to move. See, I don't use any movement keys and it'll flick me away. However, on a corner, you see when your body turns like that, it will have the right side or the left side of your torso, just one side of your torso, will impact or collide with the truss, and it'll push you based on where you push it. So if I'm, say, really close to this corner and I'm not going to move at all, okay, and I'm just going to flick, see, it pushes me to the side. You need to keep that in mind. So whenever you're flicking like this, I I use the W key to try to, keep myself in place, and it helps quite a bit. And then I also think that shift flicking, like something like this, helps a lot with going away from a corner of a truss. It is important to learn to do this, as it may come up in any obbies you're playing. And so now this ceiling won't be as much of an obstacle to me, and I can go up to like up here, or that's a little high, but down here. And now, instead of, like, if I was closer, I was thinking of doing something like upward momentum to get to it, but upward momentum might be failable since you have to press quite a few keys, right? You have to do a negative movement key, and then you have to switch to a positive movement key. However, I realize that if I go away from the truss like this, then I don't have to do upward momentum, and I can just do normal momentum, and it is a lot less failable to jump. And that's what you want. You don't want to jump that's failable, because you don't want to fail. All right. New scenario. Here we have a truss on the Tower of Champions Road, floor 2. And we must go from on this truss to up and make it through this gap right here and onto the platform that I'm standing on concurrently. And so in order to do that, let's track it from the start. You'll come from here and you'll make it onto this truss over here. So to get through this gap, we should probably get over there first by using our truss maneuvering skill, truss gliding, and use a safer version since we're going to go around a corner using 2 keys, like so. And then you might want to go to the corner of the truss, right? Because that's pretty much in the corner. So now we should probably, truss flick. Now you see that did work. However, I will show you it is not 100% consistent, and of course we want consistency in our strategies, so it may work once or twice, but you don't want to have that failability in it like that. So first things first, whenever your strategy doesn't work, you want to know why it doesn't work. Alright, so you might want to think back to the previous scenario for this one. You see our body, say, it's a good distance away. That's probably about like a little more than a quarter stud away from the corner of the truss. However, if you remember, whenever you flick on a corner like that, your side of your body, right here, my left side of my torso, will hit this wall right here and will move me away from the corner. As you saw, I was on the corner, but now I'm a little bit away from it. And by doing so, hold on. So flicking, you remember that I showed you shift flicking like this. So basically shifting is about the same category as flicking. So it's about the same thing. So it will move you away from the direct corner of the truss, and because of that, your body won't be able to go into this wall right here and jump off of the truss down below you. Instead, it will be pushed to the side, and that is why it doesn't work. So I'll show you a little video. I think, yeah, okay, so you see here it is slowed. It'll slow down, but yep, there you go. As you saw, it was pushed to the side, my body, and so it wasn't able to go into the side of the truss. And a way to counteract this is to, let's just say, since we went to the side of the truss and we didn't go into the wall, we can just go closer to the truss. So even if we do go into the side, we can still make it into the wall just because of the close proximity. So one way to do this might be, going down here and flicking to the side, because flicking around a corner will make you pretty close to it. You see that's a little bit closer than, it's about a little less than a quarter stud. So if I go up here, then I'll make the jump. However, that might also be a little inconsistent and also might be a little difficult for this jump. You know, flicking can a lot of times just boot you off of it if you're not, perfect, and no human is perfect. So I know the strategy widely used for this one is to go to the side right here and make use of being able to turn on a truss. Now you see your body will be very, very close to this corner, and because of that, you will get the jump because your body, even if it is pushed to the side, which it most likely is on this, type of weird corner angle, it will still go into the truss and you'll get the jump. And it works just fine, 100% consistency, and that's what you want. So beware of the corners of a truss, and on to the next scenario. Also, if you're ever faced with a corner truss flick such as this, one of the best strategies to do this is hold, a positive movement key and a key that will go, move your momentum into the truss. So in this case, W and D, and you want your cursor to be on the corner right here, and then in first person, you'll move it to the left side of the stud, and you can do a truss flick like that, which is, the best method, because if you just do this without turning, then you won't be able to get to that jump. However, if your destination is not, over there to the side, you can just do this if you want to go straight out, which that is totally fine. However, just the best strategy for jumps such as this is like that, and you can see it also in this jump right here, like that. Alright, on to the next scenario. Alright, so here we have our first slanted truss. As you can see, the way to the right has a little bit of an angle. Alright, so I'll be teaching you how to do this. First things first, we want to go onto the truss. So now that we're on the truss, we want to go around it to the slanted side, because of course we have our destination, which is the slanted part right here, so we'll have to jump off the truss onto it. So to get around the slanted truss, there are quite a few options. On here we have a ceiling above us, so we can just, hold space, go around it like that. But what if there was no ceiling? Well, if there was no ceiling, then we couldn't go up to it and get closer to the truss, so we'd be a little bit further out, maybe like here. And if there is no ceiling, then we can't, press space against the ceiling, so maybe we'll have to go and flick around this. However, flicking might pose a little bit of a problem, since our torso, it might hit the top here and it'll be harder to grab it onto because it is, slanted. So when flicking around a slanted truss, you have to be very careful about how you do it, because it's very easy to fall off. You see, if I just willy-nilly like flick like that, because I have to hold, W into it more, or else I'll fall off, because it gets further away from me the further you go down. And then so flicking, you can do that. However, for trusses that might be a little bit more slanted, this one is kind of a bad example, but there is a type of like shift flicking method kinda, where you want to go into ghost mode like this and have your cursor onto an area, say like right here, which will be out of my reach, and then you want to tap, your positive movement key, one to go the direction you want, which in this case will be D, and the one to go onto the truss, which will be W, most of the times, actually probably all the time, but you want that, so you actually grab onto the truss. So this, and then you just tap it, and then keep doing these small denominations, and you can do that around a very, tight angled, well, that didn't work, like very slanted truss. I'll show a clip of it, and then so for, if you're ever faced with that, you'll probably want to use that method. But for just regular slanted trusses, if there's a ceiling, congratulations. If there's not, it is possible to, flick around it like this. However, be very careful. Alright, so now for jumping off of a truss, what we want to keep in mind is that, this truss is right above our head, so um, it is a little bit slanted, so it'll act as kind of a roof above your head. If you're on a roof, it won't let you jump if you press space. So if you're too close to the truss, it will act as a roof. So if I press space, it won't jump until, it pushes me down every time I press space, and eventually I will get far enough where it will let me to jump. But this poses a problem if you want to jump to, say, our destination right here. So what you want to do, say for downward momentum, you want to go a little bit below where you want to jump. In this case, probably about 3 studs below the ceiling. And even though this does act as a ceiling, remember that we actually attain our maximum height a couple studs out, so the ceiling won't affect how far we go up or down as compared to the ceiling right above us. So I'll go 3 studs down, and then this is where you want to flick out, okay? And then you want to go to that 2 stud range, and now, I didn't explain that very well, but you want to go down a little bit and then flick out, because say if you're up here and you flick out, if you go down anymore, you're prone to falling off. And so since I want to use downward momentum, since this is so far away to the destination, I'll go down a little bit, and then that's where I'll flick out, and then I'll be really far out, and then 1 second, I'll be really far out like this, and then I'll go up a tiny bit as a little bit of leniency. So now I can do my downward momentum. I'm far enough out, I won't hit my head on this, and then I'm far enough down so I won't my head on the ceiling, so I'll be able to make the jump perfectly fine. Now for normal momentum, you want to flick just normally where you want to be, so like right here, and then you can jump. Now be wary on a lot of slanted trusses. It may be a little bit too slanted for you to jump with normal momentum, and you may have to use downward momentum for the jump. And then upward momentum on a slanted truss, good luck. You have to jump right as you press your negative movement key, but on like barely slanted trusses like this, it is possible to do it. However, on more slanted trusses, it may be a lot harder, and you'll have to be very, very far out. So another thing about trusses, I'll join up a new game to show better, but you can actually flick down on a truss like this, and I'll see you in Stairway to Heaven. Alright, so we're on Stairway to Heaven right now. This is just before the last jump, right at the end. We have this little truss that we get onto, and we must make it down and climb on that little platform down here like this. However, if we are on this truss right here, and say we want to flick down to that, we won't be able to make it. So the only way to do this is to go from the top of the truss where we were down to the bottom of the truss. Now, how do we do this? Well, in some cases you can, flick down. It'll help a lot. And with flicking down, you can be, on the side, which is what the verifier of this Boomsasoak did. And I think this makes it a lot easier, right? And it's also easy to go off the truss, because if you're on the truss right here, then you can just, if you zoom in right now, your cursor won't be on it, so you'll fall off the truss and make it down to the bottom. There's also ways like, shift flicking down, which usually when I'm flicking down off the front of the truss, I like to go down a tiny bit and then flick, instead of being right up close to the truss like this. I don't know if it really helps all too much, but it helps me. So flicking down the truss is different for a lot of people, I know that, so do whatever you're most comfortable with. But there is also a surefire method that has almost no failability, that almost nobody knows. And so let me tell you how it works. So you see this truss right here. Whenever you try to jump off of it, it'll do that kind of little thing to show you that, oh, there's a roof above your head and you can't jump. However, you hear the jump sound, okay? Now, whenever you press the spacebar for like a frame, it'll take you off the truss, but since there's a roof above your head, all your forward momentum just leaves the room. And then the next frame, it'll be like, oh, this guy, he is so close to the truss, so we're going to go back to climbing animation. So only for about a second or a frame or two do you go out of the climbing animation. And in that time, you're just free. You're like falling before you get right onto the truss. And what can you do when you're falling? You can actually press a movement key. So say if I'm right here, I press space and then I press W, it'll actually get me closer to the truss. Like this. So you don't go too far down or you'll actually like jump off the truss. But see, you can tap W a little bit. You don't want to hold W too much or else you'll go up on the truss. But this way you can go down and then you can get closer to the truss. And then eventually, if you have enough patience, you'll make it down all the way here and you'll make it. However, if you do have a very long truss, then maybe you don't have the patience for that. Like, I know Boom Sissoko went really fast in his completion because he was probably very confident, because this isn't really that hard compared to the rest of the obby. So most of the time, if you're faced with something like this, going to the corner, if it's out a little bit, is a good idea. But if it's not out a bit, then be careful flicking down. You can shift flick down if you want, or you can just use the method I showed you. And then you'll be able to, make it to where you want to go. But there's also another way or another type of obstacle that needs flicking down on a slanted truss. I'll show you that. It'll be on the side this time. Alright, so we're here in Tower of Journey's End. We have this truss. It's kind of like a double or triple truss to make it a little bit longer and easier. But it is on the side. So when we're going down this, it is, basically the same as if you were to do it from the front. However, the side, this time you can't do the, jump method because you'll just jump off. So you will have to flick down, use positive flicks, probably the best move, or you can, shift flick. And so now you know how to flick down a truss, you know how to go around a truss. This one's a little too steep for me to do that, but actually no, I think I can. It'll be a little hard, but you know how to go around a truss, you know how to jump off a truss. So now let me go back to Stairway to Heaven and show you how to flick off of a truss. Alright, so we're back to Stairway to Heaven, literally the jump right before. But now we're going to be flicking off of this truss to the slanted truss that we were on just a minute ago. And so this time it's basically the same thing as a normal truss flick. However, notice that the bottom of our torso, remember, we wanted it to be, at most half a stud away from the truss to get a jump off of it. Now, if we go up any more, you see that our torso will get further away. So now it's quite far away. We still got the jump, but if you go any higher than that, you won't get the jump. So to, be as safe as possible, you want to be as close as possible. So to be as close as possible, that means you want the torso to be as close as possible to the truss. And to do that, you will have to have, you won't want to go up as much, so you want to go up the minimum amount. And that is about right where the torso meets the top of the truss. And here we have this, and then we can, shift flick off of it or not. I don't know why that didn't work. Oh, I think I have to go up a tiny bit more, just in case. So like this, and then that will work. And then there's also for no jumps. It's very rare to see a slanted truss no jump, but if you want to, as you know, it is just the same thing as a normal truss flick. So I just do this, and then I just don't jump. And then now you can use your methods to go down this truss. And then, wow, you did 0.5% of Stairway to Heaven. Congratulations. On to the next scenario. Alright, so in this example, we have a little truss right here, and we must make it onto this platform right here. However, there is a small, tiny little ceiling right above us. So, say if I just do my normal route with the ceiling above, go to about a little bit less than one down, and then try it, I might not make it. So what I want to show you here is that if the ceiling, the roof above the truss, isn't, out more than one stud, well, you probably can't do it if it's one stud either, but this roof is only about 1/4 of a stud, and you can actually go above it. So it doesn't just have to be a straight wall, you can go above the roof. So you can, jump like that. However, if the roof is about like 0.5 studs or a little bit less than 0.5 studs, like this one, then you can actually go up here and flick off of it. Now sometimes you might be prevented from flicking off if the truss on the inside went, all the way up. However, in this case, the truss stops, so you're able to flick off of it. And then make sure that it's not how far away you are from the wall, it's how far away you are from the truss. So you want to be 1/2 a stud or less, the closer is the better. And this can, I'll show you a little example of if the wall is like 1/2 stud up, you have to try to get like as close as possible to it, and then you'll be able to flick off of it. Okay, and yeah, so that's it. Alright, so here we have another example of a ceiling we'll have to go above. This time it is very, very far out, so we of course won't be able to flick, but maybe by flicking out we might be able to get above it. And see, I'm a little bit, and you go a little bit more, and I want to show you a little technique for some stuff like this if you want to go out as far as you can, and it is actually using alignment keys. You can just spam them and it'll make you go out like very small denominations, and you see I'm still a little bit too close, so I can just spam them again. Still a little too close. Okay. Okay, there we go. So I just barely was able to do that. So now I can make the jump. Great. So you can use that alignment key strategy for, any truss that you may need to go as far out as possible on, like a whole entire stud. So that's that for ceilings jutting out. I wish you luck on any of these obstacles that may represent these. All right. Okay, one thing I want to show, because I myself am very bad at timing, is this sort of like infinite W trap where you're on a truss and it maybe has a roof that's about one stud, and say you're jumping onto it like this, going from here, to here, and you just keep holding W and you get stuck into this thing. Now, of course, if you're good at timing, you can time it and stop at the right moment, but I wasn't, so sometimes when I'm faced with this, I failed a lot. So one way to stop this is to just turn about like 30 degrees, not too far, but you can turn about 30 degrees, and that won't get rid of it fully, because if you go back, it'll keep doing it. So you want to turn 30 degrees, holding, you know, your full most momentum into the wall. So in this case, W and A, and then you want to go into ghost mode, and you can just, well, okay, you can go into ghost mode and just tap your movement keys, and then now you can go around the truss. And then if you want to stay like on the truss, you can do this, but if you go down, you'll fall. So you can, turn a little bit, so you can actually move down instead of doing something like that. And then I'll show you it on another occasion in Tower Spiritual Rise. Yeah. Alright, so we're here in Spiritual Rise. I just wanted to show you that it works for almost all of these scenarios. So, okay, well, it didn't happen there, but yeah, say I'm far away from the truss, and it's just doing this constantly, won't stop. I'm not good at timing, so you do the 30-degree strat, go out, and then zoom in, and then now you can make the jump. Nice. Alright, cool. On to the next scenario. Alright, so this will probably be the last scenario because it is probably the most irrelevant thing that probably won't come up in your obbying journey. However, I have come across it a couple times, and it sort of stumped me on why I couldn't make the jump consistently. So I'll have a little checkpoint here. But so I have a roof above my head up here, so I want to go down over to this brick off to the right, and so I'll go 2 truss rungs down because it's not too far and it's also a little high, so I'll just use normal momentum. And here I want to show you that high FPS, even if you're far away from the truss, see I'm like a little bit less than a stud away, probably like 0.9. Even if you're on high, or even if you're far away from a truss, high FPS still does tiny minute differences that you might not be able to see with the naked eye. However, if I keep doing trials of this, I just want to show that high FPS is a little inconsistent. Sometimes it goes too far, sometimes it goes too close, sometimes it goes too low. I haven't seen the time it's gone too high, because I think the higher the FPS, like the less height you get. But if I switch down to 60 up here, you see this will limit my FPS to 60, and then doing this jump will be a lot more consistent, or not. Well, it's probably because it's on 60, and 60 makes most jumps a lot harder. But if you're on a truss and you want to say do the longest jump you can possible, I've seen a lot of people switch from a high FPS to a lower FPS, because jumping off the truss on a low FPS is usually better, because a lot of these tiered obbies are designed for 60 FPS. So this might not affect you in any way, but it is very advanced, and I just want you to know about it. So if you're ever stuck on a jump, you might be able to make it a couple times, and it may look something like this, or you want to use downward momentum to go down, then maybe try switching to a lower FPS and it might become more consistent. Alright, so before the end of the video, I just want to go over a couple extraneous tips that you can use that I've found throughout years of obbying. First things first, we have, you're on a truss and you can flick around it, right? But there actually is another way to go around a truss if you have a roof above you. And that way is to just spam either a forward movement key, like in this case A, or like going momentum into the truss, which can be W, or you can do both at the same time. Now this will like diminish it's like how good it is, the more you use it. And then to reset it, you can, do that, or you can, you know, press space. And a lot of times, the way it's going might not be the way you want it to go. And on some trusses, there is a way to fix that by, a lot of times you can hold space and go the way you want it to go, and then do it like this. But this truss might not be able to do that. But it is a good way. You can harness its power to go around trusses very, very carefully. And it's honestly, it's not that slow either. Um, but like right here, you'll see that it might, like stop going as much as it used to, and then you'll have to reset it. But it's very useful for going around, really scary corners, or it can be used in a lot of jank. So keep that in mind and keep it in your arsenal. Okay, so actually a little example to show this momentum thing, by pressing, just a key up against it. So here we have, a little truss, and we want to go over there. However, it's only about 4 studs out, so we want to use that one that'll give us the least distance, the most height. So, of course, that is upward momentum, right? Now, what we'll probably want to do is go to the corner of this truss, like right here, and then there's a ceiling above my head, so I probably will want to, flick away from it. However, trying to flick away from it without being like diagonal like this, because you in reality want to be like straight on like this, to get your momentum the right direction. However, flicking away presents an issue, and it's also very, very failable trying to do this. So we can use that W method or A method. So we'll go up on it like this, and then we can turn around with space, right? And then so now we just want to tap W and A until my cursor is near the corner, not fully at the corner, and then we'll zoom in like that, and now we're about a good distance away, right? About a little more than half a stud, maybe like 3/4 of a stud, and we can make the jump without hitting our head, which is one of the most important parts of it. Okay, back. Also, another thing I want to mention is truss gliding. I know I only talked about truss gliding using, a sideways movement key like A or D, which will be positive. However, a lot of times if you want to get, really close to the edge of something, it can be, a little bit inconsistent. Say, you can be a little bit close to the truss, maybe like this, and then if you press the key, it can push you like a distance that you don't want to go. I might not be able to replicate it right now, but inevitably it will happen to you, as it happens to everybody. So a different way to glide across a truss is to, turn a little bit the way you want to go, and you can just hold W, and then that will be very small denominations. You can, turn just a tiny bit, and look, I'm just moving very ever so slightly to the edge that I want to go to, make the jump. And then one truss glide method I use is, I know I see Green Bean using it a lot, one of the top hobbyists. It's sort of like, I don't really know how to explain it, but you like turn a little bit into the way you go, and you only press W, and it might not seem too consistent, but it is honestly so much more consistent than, oh, did you see right there? Yeah, I was too close to the truss, so it like pushed me really far like that. So be wary of that, and you might want to harness the power of one of these truss glide methods. I use this one for going to like the corner of a truss and then going around, or going to the absolute or the absolute side to like maybe flick off of it, like this. And then also another thing, if you're like shift flicking off, you're on the corner of a truss, this will happen a lot. I think a really good method to prevent getting flat-sided is to just turn a little bit like that and then do the jump, especially so if you're closer to it like this, you know, maybe you're like this. I feel this is so much better than just going on forwards, which it might not seem like it, and it honestly might be a placebo, but I believe that it lets you not get flat-sided as much. So if you're not able to make a jump consistently on a truss that might look something like that, then try that method. Okay, so also another thing to mention, there actually is another way to ladder flick or truss flick, I guess. It has to do with the same principles as this method. Basically, you can just like turn your body like this, and since your torso's, you know, in a little bit more, then you can sort of just press a movement key because it'll register that you're on this truss, your foot, and then like you can just walk off, or you can just like jump. And then this is better, I'd say, than using this method in a couple ways, because this time you're able to go down to there and do it, so it could be very useful for, you know, long jumps and stuff. And then basically almost every property in this video is also the same for ladders. However, you must note that ladders are a little bit different because, look, if I flick on them, you see like it's a little chaotic. You go up a little bit. That is because on every single prong, it's a different brick instead of a truss being just one singular thing. So you can't flick off of these. However, on a truss, you can flick off every single little prong, or a ladder. Did I say ladder? I forget. So just make sure you keep that in mind. So, I mean, you can still, you know, move around like this. However, be careful, you know, flicking off of them. And then it's also the same thing. So if I'm, say, right here, I won't get as much of a jump than if I was, say, right, than if I was, say, right there. So the bottom of your torso still matters in relation to the ladders. Just, you know, apply the stuff from the truss to the ladders. I may make a separate video on ladders. However, I don't know if it's needed. I think this video is plenty. So, yep, I'll see you. Anyways, I just hope everything in this, you know, video is helpful, and then I'm actually just gonna rant a little bit at the end, so I'll see you there. Alright, welcome to the end of the video. In the background is floor 5 of Citadel the Eternal Calamity, which has many of the scenarios I talked about in it, so you can watch that while I talk. Now, I know this video wasn't top notch. It wasn't the best of my abilities. You see, it was kind of done on a whim. That's why there's a lot of likes, and so's. It didn't really have much of a script, so it sort of lengthened the video to a degree it maybe needn't be. Now, I know trusses do hold up a lot of information, so it would be long nonetheless. However, future videos, they won't be as long and grueling to get through, with a much better structure than this one. Um, you know, I was thinking of making maybe like a 4-part series on how to master obbies, you know, in order from beginner to pro, with topics ranging from like simple awareness to complicated and esoteric topics like your mindset in an obby. Um, and then maybe some breakdowns of other obbies like wall hops. So if you look forward to that and like what I do on this channel, consider subscribing and liking the video. It'll give me more motivation to make the content. Also, I know that I may have missed a few trust scenarios like lag high jumping, but I know there are definitely a lot more. So comment below, and if there is enough, I may make a second video about, you know, some niche scenarios with trusses. And another thing to add, I know I may have made a mistake, so please also leave a comment on any mistakes that I made, and I'll note them in the description. And also, you know, drop a comment if you're confused, and I'll try to explain it, or, you know, what you're confused about to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy. You're like a night
intruder. I am the last resort. Picking at our desire. This should be left alone. You'll never be what I want. You'll never connect the dots. My number is not your crisis line. Could you please stop trying, dear? Woke up in your bed. That's killing me. And if my heart gives, tear it out and take it as a trophy. I undress. I digress. Should I stay in tonight? I want to be wanted but left alone. We'll never be what we want. We'll never connect the dots. My number is not your crisis line. Take what's yours, I'll take mine. Tempting opportunity sends me off into a new obscurity. Why's it feel so good to set myself back?